Welcome to the 415th episode of the Jami Dulaney Plant-Based Wellness Podcast. My name is Jami Dulaney, and I'm your host. I'm a plant-based cardiologist and endurance athlete living in Southwest Florida. Thank you, and welcome. I hope the new year is treating you good so far. We're doing great with our challenge so far. We're into day 4. Every day is cumulative, so it's day 1 plus day 2, and so forth for 31 days. So we have 31 new great health habits by the end of January, and hopefully people can carry them on through the year and build on them. So it's been a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to the feedback. The people that give me the feedback, we're going to give them a drawing for a shirt and a cookbook. So it's going to be a great kickoff to January. Running's going good. Back ramping it up for possible 50-miler in February, second week, the Rocky Raccoon in Texas. We're then going to head to the east coast of Florida for the Treasure Coast Marathon in Stuart. So we're hoping to have a lot of plant-based runners and striders show up for that. It's going to be a great time. We have our superstars from last year, plus we're adding on some more. So if you want to join us, I think there's still room. So go on over to the Treasure Coast Marathon and sign up, and we'd love to see you there. This podcast is being recorded on January the 4th, and it hit me that this was the day that my grandmother passed away some 54 years ago when I was 16. She died of a massive heart attack after having had diabetes, and was one of the founding reasons why I became a physician, to try to make things a little bit better for other people. And it took me a while to figure out how that we can really reverse diabetes and heart disease, but I think we're on the right path now. But I'd like to dedicate this podcast to her. I think given the opportunity, she would have been glad to become a plant-based person. She had a big garden, and I think she would have made the transition just fine had she had the opportunity. So if your grandmother has diabetes, get her to become plant-based. It's never too late. Nevertheless, again, back in the day, she went to the doctor once a year, a local GP in our little town with no streetlights, and had her urine tested to see if there was glucose in her urine. And if there was glucose in her urine, that meant her sugars were greater than 200, which would have been poor control. And so that was a sign that she was doing well. Her dietary education was try not to eat too much sugar. So I don't remember her eating much of the desserts that she made, but certainly her cooking was traditional Irish cooking, fabulous. She cooked in an iron skillet on a wood stove. There was a lard container on top of the stove. We ate a lot of pork because that's what my family raised, as well as some beef. But there was a heavy amount of pork, I would say, in our diet that was fried. Everything was fried. Fried potatoes. If there was leftover mashed potatoes, they were fried the next day. So there was, when people talk about seed oils causing the problem, and we should go back to saturated fats, clearly I can say from experience that certainly is not the answer. She had a big garden. She grew things like beets, cabbage, potatoes, a lot of green beans, corn, some greens, light on the greens, really, other than the cabbage, sweet potatoes. And we ate out of the garden in the summer, and she canned, and we ate out of the garden in the winter that was canned. Everything was canned. Sweet potatoes were canned with sugar, or brown sugar, or some sort of sweetener. Pears and apples that we had, she actually would make applesauce, and there was a tremendous amount of sugar added into things. Pies, we never ate a piece of fruit that didn't have sugar on it, and most of the time didn't eat a piece of fruit anyway because we saved it to make a pie. And so that's kind of how I grew up. She worked very hard. She worked all day long, a lot of manual labor in the place that she lived. We didn't have indoor plumbing until I was about 8. My parents lived a few miles away. I would stay with my grandmother while my parents worked, and she babysat me in the evenings. But for the most part, I was there only during the day. and occasional nights. So she carried water to do washing, washed outside. There was a fire maid that my grandfather made. She did her own cleaning. She did her own gardening. It was all manual. So she worked very hard, and certainly was physically active. But the saturated fat content in her diet was, probably 30 or 40%. Again, no health care other than if she was ever sick. And I really don't ever remember being sick until she had her heart attack. But the symptoms of her heart attack was after Christmas, and she had made the big spread for the family and had the big gathering, and she was just so tired. I remember her saying when I went up to visit her that she wasn't feeling well. And again, it was very unusual for her to be sick or have the flu. I don't really remember her having colds or anything when I grew up, even though she kept me and my cousins and everything. But she was so tired. She just couldn't get her energy back after Christmas. And the day that we went up to visit her, she said, she thought she had the flu. She had this terrible indigestion. If she could just burp, she thinks she would have felt better, and she was nauseated. And the local GP actually came to see her and thought she had the flu, but later that night things got worse, and she was taken to the hospital and was found that she was having a massive heart attack. Back in the day, there were no stents or emergency procedures. You just wrote it out in the intensive care unit, and she subsequently went into heart block. And we were told that a temporary pacemaker was made or was placed to help stabilize her, but it wasn't long after in the evening that she passed away. It happened to her. She never had symptoms of heart disease that she let know, and certainly the symptoms that she was having was not typical for what most people think as a heart attack, a pressure in your chest or pain down your arms or in your jaw. But I didn't even know if people thought that at that point. But nevertheless, those symptoms stuck with me they've stuck with me the rest of my life. I was 16 at the time. And, it was the first, it became, diabetics can have very atypical chest discomfort. Especially diabetics, because of neuropathies and they just don't feel things like other people feel things sometimes, and GI issues get confused. And everybody, your nerves to your chest are all intermingled, so severe esophageal spasm can feel like a heart attack. Pain in your ribs can feel like chest pain, and so it can be hard to differentiate. What I will tell you, and what I've learned over the years, is that if you've had a heart attack, when the chest pain comes back, it'll come back the same way. So if somebody had a heart attack and they had jaw pain, it'll come back as jaw pain. If they had arm pain, it'll come back as arm pain. But it can be a variety of things because of the innervation of the upper, the upper chest. So if you have those symptoms of severe fatigue and you just feel worse than you ever have as far as your energy level, don't ignore it. But don't think just because your diabetes is fairly well controlled or you're ignoring it, it's not causing you problems, that you're not going to have cardiovascular symptoms from it. It became a driving factor for me to go to medical school. Diabetes has always been in my mind because my other grandmother died of diabetes and the complications, as I've mentioned on this podcast in the past. So my early practice, it was all about treating the numbers, getting a hemoglobin A1C as low as I can. I still like to see a hemoglobin A1C normalized, but not through medication, through reversing diabetes, because unlike what the TV ads say, if your hemoglobin A1C comes down a couple of points, you can celebrate with your doctor, but it doesn't do anything to change the secondary side effects of diabetes. You're masking them by just normalizing the number through artificial means. We either flog the pancreas to make more insulin, but again, we're making more insulin in a presence that is needed to drive glucose into the cell that doesn't want to go because the receptor's blocked. So we're putting out more insulin than needs to be. Insulin drives the secondary side effects of diabetes by increasing inflammatory markers. Again, I talked a little bit about, increased fat deposition in the muscle cells, which makes things worse. It becomes a vicious cycle. And it causes platelet clumping and clotting. So getting a hemoglobin A1C down through medication that either stimulates insulin production or decreases gastric emptying, it doesn't fix the problem, it masks the problem. And the glucose is better, but not the secondary side effects. So the only way around this is to actually reverse diabetes, and it's very doable. Unfortunately, a lot of people can't hang long term with the necessary changes because they spent their whole life eating a certain way, and we kind of get them going on a plant-based diet, and they slide off. They slide off because they feel okay, and they start to feel better on a plant-based diet. But it's very important to normalize body mass index. The problem is with this fat deposition, we have to get the fat out of the muscle. We have to get the fat out of the adipose tissue, we have to get the fat out of the abdomen and the visceral fat around the organs. And so exercise plays a key role, as well as plant-based nutrition, and fat content really has to come down. A keto diet will not reverse diabetes. It causes more fat deposition over time. So again, the answer is a low-fat plant-based diet. And it works. We see people get better. It's a matter of people sustaining it because, as I'll talk about in a little bit later, people get sucked back into the middle to be like everybody. Career has been around not only helping other people to try to reverse their diabetes, first with medications, which didn't work, and now nutrition. I am a huge proponent of exercise because it does help maintain your weight once you get the weight off. It will not cause you to normalize your body weight without changing your diet. So exercise is extremely important to me. Being a lifelong exerciser is extremely important to me, and is what I recommend to my patients. I know that if I let my weight go up, I too could become a diabetic because that's just how my family and my genetics were built. Good old Irish women tend to carry their weight in the middle. Body composition is huge. So on this January 4th, I'd like to dedicate this podcast, my whole career, for essentially it's been because I do believe we know the reason for diabetes, and people don't need to die from adult onset diabetes or heart disease nearly in the amount that is happening around the world. So enjoy the rest of this podcast. People often ask, is caffeine okay? Is coffee okay? Caffeinated beverages. There was a recent study done that mainly in mice and rats, but looked at the effect of caffeine on heart muscle and metabolic function. And actually it showed, in the presence of exercise, showed an improvement in left ventricular function and a decrease in fibrosis of the heart muscle. There's improved fatty acid and glucose metabolism. It helps to build muscle mass, decrease fatty liver. So there's a lot of good things that can occur with caffeine in moderation, per se, at least in a mouse or a rat study. So caffeine in the presence of exercise, obviously not taken to a toxic extreme, can actually be very beneficial. Caffeine can increase people's heart rate somewhat. So there is a little bit of a caution, obviously, in people that are prone to arrhythmias, whether caffeine might trigger that. It's always been plus minus whether caffeine's going to bring on an atrial arrhythmia or not. Some people are very sensitive to caffeine, some people aren't. But if you are a coffee drinker or you use caffeinated beverages, a lot of the sports drinks have caffeine. It is performance enhancing, and there doesn't appear to be any long-term bad things when it comes to muscles or heart function. Just like the ability to get off a floor is an indicator of longevity, so is grip strength and grip speed. So as I'm sitting here, I actually have one of these big spring devices that I'm using to improve my grip to increase my pull-up. That was a tip from Ginny McCall, the master ninja warrior. But it's also been shown to be a factor in overall mitochondrial health. And those are the little organelles that are our metabolism powerhouses in the muscle cell. And as we get older, not only lose muscle fibers, but you lose the mitochondria. So you have more than one mitochondria per muscle cell, and those start to decrease as well. And when they start to decrease, there is an associated decrease in muscle fiber and muscle fiber function. When people are insulin resistant, the glucose can't get into the cell for the mitochondria to ultimately use for energy. And this leads to increased deposition of fat in the muscle, which further decreases the function and makes insulin resistance worse. So it becomes somewhat like a vicious cycle for people that are diabetic. The carnivore movement, went from grass-fed lean meat to all this fatty meat that they can get their hands on. And if you think, the fatty meat with the marbling through it, that's kind of what happens to humans as well when we age and the mitochondria decrease, insulin resistance sets in, and there's more fat deposited into the muscle. So it's not a good thing by any stretch of the imagination. And of course, I don't see how anybody could imagine eating something like that could make things better by any stretch. So the more muscle people tend to have, the better lipid metabolism that people tend to have. So if you think about most people, with the exception of a family hereditary type, very, very high lipid levels, most people's cholesterol don't start. The cholesterol doesn't start to go up until their 40s. And then there's this climb, 40s to 50s, and then there can be like a steep climb. And it obviously has to do with diet and nutrition. But the muscle fiber loss probably is also playing a role in lipid metabolism. So it's another reason to do some strength training and keep the muscle mass up. If you're going to the gym this early January, and by February, the trainer tells you and does some measurements and that you're gaining muscle mass already, beware. A lot of people say, well, I haven't lost any weight, but I'm getting more muscle mass and less fat mass and redistributing things. It's not that easy. It's not that easy. If you have fat mass, then that needs to go away in order to actually increase your muscle mass. Regardless of what kind of exercise you do, whether you do endurance type training, running, biking, swimming, versus resistance, lifting weights, it increases mitochondrial mass and all these functions improve. If when you're doing your resistance training, the muscle cells or the muscle fibers actually enlarge, the muscle mass increases, strength and power increases accordingly. When you're doing endurance activities, you're improving your cardiorespiratory fitness, your oxygen consumption, so your ability of your muscles and tissues to take up oxygen, which is very important, improves, and overall physical performance increase. So, there's always an argument on Twitter and in the news of, resistance training, high intensity training, long and slow training. The reality of it is we need to do all of it to some degree. It doesn't have to be necessarily in a gym. A lot of people have jobs that are very physical, but it needs to be well-rounded, both a combination of strength and endurance training. When I see people out meandering with their dog, walking them, yes, they're up on their feet, they're getting steps in, but that's not what we're after either, because we want people to be able to walk at a good clip. The slower you walk, the worse your prognosis is as well, because again, it comes down to the neurons firing to make your leg muscle contract to make you go quicker. Doesn't necessarily mean that you need to do speed work, and the reality of it is most people benefit from exercising at a conversational pace, but at an increased heart rate. So a good test to know whether you're walking too fast is if you if you can't recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Some people talk about the green eggs in hand, but the reality is if you can't recite the Pledge of Allegiance, you're probably walking or running too fast the majority of time in order to get the most out of cardiovascular fitness. The idea is the longer you can perform at a lower heart rate, the more you train your muscles to use oxygen, and you'll start to move faster at a lower heart rate. If you just go out and sprint like little kids do in a 5K, you're just going to have so much and you burn out because your muscles aren't used to using fat. They're just going to use the glucose that they have available, and because there's not much of them, they can't store that much glucose or glycogen, so you never get anywhere. So you have to exercise at the lower heart rates in order to train your muscles to use a combination of fat and carbohydrates so you don't burn all your matches, so to speak. It's like having a fire up north, all these people that have these roaring fires this time of the year, and you're burning wood, and you go through a lot of wood. At night, you stoke the fire with coal to keep the fire burning and just at an amber so that you can get it started again in the morning. If you let the fire go all the way out, then you have to start from scratch and everything has to be heated up. So you want to keep the fire burning at a low level all the time, and then have periods where you increase the burn through increased use of carbohydrates. It has been shown that you can increase mitochondrial mass and muscle mass at any age, but the people that are lifelong exercisers do much better over time than the people that try to take it up at 80, so to speak. So it's no time to put it off. You want to have lifelong exercise. I used to think, at what point do you have enough muscle mass? Can you just ride it out and you don't have to go to the gym? But the idea is never. Because the minute we start moving, the loss of muscle mass accelerates. And, again, everybody's familiar with when you put people to bed, they lose a significant amount of muscle mass in a few days. So if somebody goes into the hospital with pneumonia or breaks their hip, they lose a lot of muscle mass. And that's why older individuals who've lost a lot of muscle mass are very prone to respiratory failure, pneumonia after breaking a hip, or repeated falls, because they just don't have the muscle mass and respiratory function to get themselves back on track. So it can be a very devastating injury to an older person that has low muscle mass if they break a limb. It's easy enough to fix a broken limb. It's what happens to the rest of the body when you're trying to heal that's the problem. So that's why it's so important to get people up and moving as quick as they possible. And it's why it's so important to make sure you're moving and picking up something heavy and doing the activities that maybe you've hired out or to make your life easier, really just make you weaker. I read a recent study that was just put out looking at it was a large observational study looking at a large cohort of people that were Medicare age, so that 65 plus age group, to see whether or not pneumococcal vaccines are actually beneficial. And there was a lot of fuzzy math involved and person years and mathematical equations and extractions. But the reality of it is, vaccinating people for a pneumococcal pneumonia can barely save a few hospitalizations, but has never been proven to be life-saving. On the contrary, there are complications to getting pneumococcal vaccines, especially in an elderly population where you're injecting adjuvants like aluminum in brains that are a little bit more, have been exposed to a lot of toxins over time. You're committing natural killer cells to a potential threat that maybe you should have saved those natural killer cells for some other function. So I believe that it doesn't improve your immune function by getting a vaccine at this age, especially if it's not going to save a life. So I don't think that's a good plan as far as preventative medicine. When somebody goes to the hospital, first thing they do is ask them if you had a flu shot, have you had a pneumococcal vaccine? Neither of these have been shown to save lives. However, if one were to eat a diet high in vitamin C and antioxidants and chlorophyll, decrease processed oil intake to decrease inflammation, decrease seed oils and decrease omega-6s that are found in meat, decrease dairy that, associated with inflammation, and exercise, people do much better. So I think that, and of course, eating greens for vascular health. The more greens you eat, the more you dilate blood vessels everywhere, the more capillaries deliver oxygen to little neurons, the more your nerves stay alive, the more your muscles contract. So I think there's a lot you can do that's much better with no side effects versus just getting in line for every vaccine that has a potential, or it says that, this is going to save you, because I don't believe that's going to save you. So if you're looking for a few things to put on your 2023 list to try to accomplish this year, I would have you check your overall mobility out. Can you get off of the floor without using your hands? That can be, rolling to your side, doing a sit-up, going to your knees and standing without using your hands, or doing a cross-leg Indian and standing up. Can you do push-ups? We know that in studies with men, they were done mainly with men, that the more push-ups, over 40 push-ups, is a marked improved cardiovascular fitness. We know that walking speed increases, is associated with a better outcome than not being able to walk. People are often told that, their joints are bad, their knees are bad, they're bone on bone, so they can't. I will say that if you are told that, or you think you can't, you won't, and you'll never will be. And that's somewhat of a harsh statement to say, but to date there's been no mechanical replacement part in the human body that functions as good as the original equipment. So when the surgery happens, there's scar tissue and restricted motion, time in bed, time off your feet, loss of muscle mass, and decreased range of motion. So it's been shown that if somebody gets a hip replacement and they couldn't get off the ground before they had a hip replacement, there is a very low likelihood that they will be able to get off the ground after their hip replacement. A lot of people are told not to do a lot of motions, not to get past 90 degrees for fear of dislocating the prosthetic hip. That's probably not completely accurate information. There's a couple small studies that looked at people that were fit and pretty mobile before they had their hip replacement, and those people didn't seem to have any problem when they proceeded to do some of these exercises or train. So, word to the wise, look at your shoulder range of motion, your hip range of motion, and if you can't move those joints, work on moving those joints to protect yourself over the 2023. I have a practice that is different from most other physicians or allopathic doctors that have wellness practice, and that our patients are long-term. So I hope that they stay with me. They can leave, obviously, if they want to. But I have had patients in my practice. I still have some all the way back from when I came to Florida in 1999. But there's a fair number of my small wellness practice that have been with me for some time. And there's a core of patients that have been with me a moderate amount of time. And then there's some patients, at the top end that, for whatever reason, it didn't seem to be a good fit for them, or they've decided to go a different path and they move on. But what I see is that sometimes people come into the practice and they are very gung-ho to make changes. Maybe they've had a health scare. Typically, that's what happens. They've had a pretty bad health scare. And they make these giant strides over the next year. And human nature takes, over, and people start to coast. And when they coast, they kind of drift back into the standard nutritional, standard American diet, standard mobility practices of everybody else. It becomes too hard to be an outlier over time, and they get sucked back into what everybody else is doing. It's hard, it's hard to be different. If you look at, again, curves I've talked about, before, early adopter, people that are, very gung-ho to go against the fray, people that have used alternative therapies to heal their cancer and nutritional therapies to heal their cancer, people that, are do extreme exercise feats, ninja warriors and running 100 miles. And then there are people that don't even know those things exist. And if they heard about it, they would say, why do they even exist? And then there's the middle portion where they just, most people are just kind of happy doing what their neighbor does. And if you look across the room in the Outback, most people look alike. If you go into Bob Evans, most people look alike. If you go into certain parts of the country, most people look alike. There's an unhealthy atmosphere, so it looks normal. And for the most part, it is normal. There's, there may be a few outliers, but it's, they're just thought to be different. And they may be tolerated, they may not be. But for the most part, there's this big center portion of people that occupy the middle. And when you try to change, again, you're focused on a goal for a year and a half, and you maybe almost attained the goal, or you did attain the goal, and you start to kind of slip back into the fray, so to speak, and back into the crowd. I heard someone today say, I can't take it anymore. You got to die of something. Why fight it? Maybe I don't want to live to be 90 years old. People think of us as old anyway, so all those little sayings that creep in to make us all doubt our core. So I think it's a really good idea for people to have health goals as we enter 2023, even if you're starting the health goals over. And they have to be specific. I remember an English teacher once told me, it's like, well, you have to find a research topic that's specific enough. It's too broad. You have to narrow it down. And I think that's the same way with our health goals, is you have to narrow it down. What are your goals, and step by step. With running, it's a 5K, a 10K, a half marathon, a marathon, a 50K perhaps, and further. People that jump right into the marathon, they can complete it, but typically it's a one and done thing. But people that learn the process and work the process for longer periods of time understand that it's a step process, and you learn to enjoy the journey as opposed to just focus on this giant, broad goal. So, if you can find in 2023 some specific things that you want to do, I think it's much more helpful as opposed to, this, I just want to be healthy and will give it my best shot, or I'm trying, or it's the best I can do, or perhaps even it's too much. I admire the people that I've spoken to recently that, they fell off, fall off the wagon a little bit, but then they find a new goal that they start to look at, whether it's, being involved with a new group of people, a new church, a new hobby, a new activity that's positive, being outside, a new project that they maybe didn't think they could do, but they're actually doing quite well doing. Those people tend to be able to pick it up and go forth. So I don't think when you make these giant changes to, say, to plant-based nutrition, it's sustainable if you don't keep having goals to keep you in the game, because you get sucked back into the old ways because you did it too long, and there's too many people that want you to be like them. So I think it's if you can find the goal that you want and stick to it, but make it small enough that there are attainable steps that you can get to each one of those steps, and keep progressing. And, again, start to enjoy the process and, take comfort in what you have accomplished, and, pat yourself on the back for the things that you're able to do. I have a lot of people in this practice that are doing things that they never thought they'd even want to do, and now they love them. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there a little bit and try something a little bit different, more on the fringe as opposed to that middle behavior. Your job is not to convert other people into being plant-based or endurance athletes, but your job is to be the best plant-based person, the healthiest outlier that you can be, to keep them from catching you. So it's almost like you're running from the middle as opposed to being sucked back into the middle. And I think that's, and keep focusing on the outliers. Keep focusing on the 20 percenters that are out there doing great things and getting off their medications and getting off the floor and running half marathons and marathons. Those are the people you look to for motivations, as opposed to getting sucked back into the fold, so to speak, of what everybody else would like you to be and make it easier on them. Because if it's really easy, it's probably not going to be too exciting or worth doing. And I think boredom sucks people back as well. So I'm going to look forward to hearing about the people that are doing our Build Your Health program and how adding little steps every day in the month of January is going to ultimately affect them come February the 1st. And whether it seems much more doable, the positive changes that they see, and how it affects their outlook. And then the next step will be, how do we keep it going forward? So it's exciting times. Thank you for listening as always. Thank you for the email, Dr. Rebecca, who is a pathologist out in California and an ultra runner. Dr. Rebecca is getting ready to train for her second 100-miler. So kudos to you. I can't wait to hear the results of that. She's also plant-based. So, again, full-time pathologist, training to do 100-milers. Motivation to all of us, including me. So thanks for listening. And if you would like to share your story with me on your plant-based transition journey or hopes for 2023, I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at jami@drdulaney.com, jami@drdulaney.com, or please check out the website at drdulaney.com to see what we're up to. You can follow me on Instagram. I put some of the food that I eat there, Jamila Dulaney. Join us at the Treasure Coast Marathon in March if you'd like. We're going to be having a lot of fun with a big plant-based group of runners, hopefully. So thank you for listening. See you next week.